Hello, everyone. I am Corey Andrew Powell, and I am so thrilled today to be joined by Chris Anderson, who's led the TED brand since 2001, overseeing its transformation from an annual conference to a nonprofit with global reach, sharing the extremely popular TED Talks, of course, their podcasts, and of course, TED Ed. It's really important that the brand is so synonymous with everyone knowing that it's accessible and it's free for everyone to check out. So that's what's such an important part of this brand. Now, Chris's new book comes out in January 2024. I have it right here with me. It's called Infectious Generosity, the Ultimate Idea Worth Spreading. And so we're so thrilled he's here today. Chris, welcome to Motivational Mondays.
It's great to be here, Corey.
Thank you. It's our honor to have you here. So, I did tell you a few seconds ago before we started that your book is something that my soul was craving right now. And I want to just sort of start out with this point. We're in a very divisive time, probably one of the most divisive times I've ever witnessed on my time on this planet. And it's just chaos everywhere. And we're all fighting over everything from, who took the cap off the toothpaste to, bombs dropping. And we're just fighting over everything. Your book seems to sort of try to give us an antidote to that. So share a little bit, if you will. What was the purpose and the message of you writing this book, and what is the correlation to that?
Yeah, I think it is exactly that. I'm a tech optimist, or at least that's always how I saw myself. And when the internet took off in the late 90s, I saw it, as did many other people, as this incredible tool that was going to bring the world together. You could see people anywhere in the world. Maybe we would get over our sort of our various tribalisms and start understanding each other and connecting with each other. And, there was a lot of dreams that would happen. The story of the last 10 years on the internet has kind of been the opposite of that. And it's been crushingly disappointing, I would say. And I guess the main culprit is social media. I don't think anyone intended it to tear the world apart, but the unintended consequence of certain things about social media's design has led to that. We are using it to amplify voices of people who want to show how scary the world is, want to show how scary and annoying and angry making the other side is. And it's forcing us into sides. It's forcing us to pick sides almost, and to just view other people not just with disagreement, but with anger and fear and hate, and sometimes even disgust. That's terribly, terribly destructive. So at one level, the book is an attempt to try to reclaim the internet as a force for good in the world. I think it's doable. I really think it's doable. I think people... it's a battle that can be won. There actually is so much good that's happening online that is being shared, and there are so many ways that, in principle, the internet could make a big difference. That I think it's worth trying to explicitly address this. And I've been on a journey the last few years. It started with something that happened at TED, and it's kind of gone on from there to convince me that we can actually dial up generosity in new ways in the moments that we're in, and literally change how we think about each other.
So you mentioned that it happened through something that occurred at TED. Would that be the mystery experiment that you're referring to?
Well, so that was part of it. We can talk about that in a minute if you like. Yeah. But the initial thing was literally just the decision at TED to give away our content. We were, we're a nonprofit. We had this valuable conference, and it was 2006. It was way back when online video came along, and suddenly you could share stuff like a TED Talk online, but it was a little bit scary for us to do that because we thought it might stop people coming to the conference. Why would you pay if the talks were free? We did it anyway. Was it an act of generosity? In some way it was. We're a nonprofit. We felt we had an obligation to do it. And what happened blew us away. Far from reducing demand for the conference, it actually accelerated it. But these talks went viral. They spread around the world, and so many people started to become our friends who we had never heard of. Like translators took TED Talks into 100 languages. People all over the world shared them. The whole thing spread by word of mouth. There was no paid marketing, and then it led to us deciding, okay, if that worked, let's give away our brand too. So TEDx, we had the X on it, and it's resulted in 3,000 annual events around the world that are producing God knows how many videos every year. It's really, it's something that you couldn't do pre-internet in any way.
Yeah.
And it's something you couldn't do in business terms. Like I've got 10 people in New York overseeing 3,000 global events that generate huge value for TED and for the world. So, so it got me thinking that in the internet age, the rules about what you give away and what you hold on to have fundamentally changed. And it applies not just to TED, it applies to any organization, any individual.
You do make a reference in the book. You say in there how, like, if you were to do this pre sort of like internet age, you would be burning CDs and you'd have to sell them basically, because or else you'd be, not that you'd have to, but that would be a cost, a really big cost to then produce DVDs or CDs, which would have been the way that you would have shared this info prior. And of course, I mean, to get them to people, they'd have to buy them most likely. So yeah, it is a very big pivotal shift, and we've had quite a few TED Talks on this platform on our show, and it is fascinating the level of mentorship, if you will, that you get from some of these amazing speakers who, in your own words, they could be actually getting people to pay for them in many cases to hear these really profound speeches. So it's fulfilling a need, clearly, that people are definitely getting into and are appreciative of. Now, you talk about rethinking generosity as well in this connected age. And when you say connected, I assume that is the digital space you're referring to.
Yes.
So how can we rethink generosity as a tangible means of making the world a better place, as opposed to it seemingly being something kind of elusive, opening a door for someone? Is that the equivalent?
That's right.
Yeah.
The generosity I was taught in Sunday school was, be kind to people, but do it secretly, right? It was always meant to be, not about you at all, right? You're just doing it for the goodness of it. And I think that's made it very complicated for people in the age that we're in now. Because, when someone, I don't know, gives away something online, are they promoting themselves or are they being generous? And we quickly get confused about it. I think one of the things we need to do is just embrace a more nuanced form of generosity. The truth is that there has always been something in it for the giver to give. Even if it's just scratching your conscience and feeling better about yourself, there's always been a reason, an additional reason for you to give other than the, quote, pure goodness of it. And I think that's fine. And I think we should embrace it. I think we should move away from this world where we're constantly nitpicking people's good acts and saying, they did that, but they could have done better. Or did they really address the real problem? Or were they just doing it for their own self-interest? That sort of cynicism is destructive. And I think I think we're at a moment where it's healthy to say, let's look for the good. If there is some good intent in someone's act of giving, embrace it and celebrate it. That is a form of generosity. And when you do that, you see generosity all around us. I mean, it is amazing that we're in an age where we can get copious amounts of the things that we really love and care, like video, music, or art of all kinds, knowledge, software. It's all they're available in incredible quantities. The fact that you can go online right now and ask an AI to paint the most amazing picture you could imagine, and it will do it in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an incredible time to be alive. And and so I think that it starts right there. It starts by doing two things. One, recognizing that we can today give away incredible things in unlimited quantities. How amazing is that? And two, that we should, if we embraced it as generosity, so many things get better. We get better about how we think about the online world. We're more likely to, for example, support artists and others who are maybe struggling to make a living. We should be helping them on Patreon or tipping them or supporting them because they are being generous. The stuff we're getting from them is beautiful. We're fortunate. And so shifting to that mindset of generosity can be all around us, is all around us, and we can actually play our part. And by the way, when you make a generous act, a bold and risky generous act, what comes back is often absolutely amazing. I mean, certainly in Ted's experience, every time we've given stuff away, we have been blown away by what happened next.
Yeah.
And I just think that's the age that we're in. And it's because gifts carry with them the most important currency of our age, which is reputation.
Yeah.
If you're someone who gives away amazing things online, sooner or later, the whole damn world will know about it. And that is awesome.
Yeah, it reminds me of one of the stories I've always heard about the actress Carol Burnett, which is that when she was starting out, what changed her life was she was accepted into a art program, a theater program, and she was from a very poor family, and it was going to be a $500 fee for her to get into the school, which is today no money at all for education. But at that time, it probably was like the 40s or something, it was a lot of money. And she couldn't afford it. She was devastated. And one day she got the acceptance letter that she was to start her classes at a certain date. And she, to this day, she says, and she's almost like, 90 years old. To this day, she has no idea who paid for her tuition, but it literally changed the trajectory of her life. And she changed the history of television. And I always look at that as an example of what you just said. This person, whoever did this, humbly sat back and said, that was a good decision and I changed the world, but it wasn't from a self-promoting place. And look at the outcome. It's a really profound, example of what you just said.
It is profound. But the fact that you're sharing this story now may encourage others to do the same. We're in an age where stories like this need to be told, because the stories that are often told are ugly stories. We have a whole media industry that is biased towards telling things that are scary and ugly and not really uplifting. And so we think the worst of each other. You've just told a story that helps people think the best about each other. That is beautiful. That is powerful.
Yeah. And you bring up again, of course, the dark side of the internet, and we can't avoid it. And I shared with you too before we started that, I sometimes get so inundated with the current news cycle. But you're right, that machine is built to sensationalize what is the most frightening, the most salacious, the most terrifying, because that's how you that's the addiction being fed of the public, needing to see that. So how do you navigate that? I mean, do we just turn off the TV? Do we disconnect our internet? Like, what is the balance, in your opinion, of how do we find the medium?
I think several things. I think one, it's worth going out and looking for news sources, media sources that can show the better side of life, and there are actually lots and lots of them out there. There's a site called Future Crunch. There's Upworthy. There's just lots and lots of people who are trying to provide alternative media narrative. I think online, it's important to be really careful who you follow and where you spend time. There actually are incredible people online who can really make your day. They can fill your day with wonder and insight and so forth. There's a guy on X, an Italian guy. His name is Massimo Orgiazzo. I think he's at Rainmaker 1973. I want to say is his handle. If you only followed him on X and no one else, you'd have an amazing time on that platform, because every day, despite his health issues, he's putting out just wondrous knowledge about the world that we're in, just fascinating science, endearing stories, incredible images. And there are so many people actually like that who are there. They deserve to be amplified and followed. And more of us who do that, it will actually shape the algorithms that the X and the other social media use, because they are watching what people do. And it's a bit of a battle right now. And the fact that most people spend their time sort of absorbed by the angry feeds that beast. We've got to try and reverse that cycle. So I would just say, carefully curate who you are following. Be ready to mute or block people who are spreading poison, and do all you can to celebrate those who aren't. Like, consider supporting them financially, but certainly just like them. Click like and repost what they're doing, and let's have these sort of counterwaves going. And this stuff can happen so easily. There's this wonderful woman, an Australian woman, Catherine Barrett, who in the early days of the pandemic posted, everyone was feeling sad. People were locked in. And she noticed someone in her building had left a box of tissues in the kind of building common space with a little note saying, please help yourself to one, i.e., I know people are tearful, let's cry together, so to speak. She found it so moving. She took a picture of this thing, put it online, created a Facebook group that she called the Kindness Pandemic. This thing grew so fast, it crashed, like 500,000 people joined. And it's going to this day, it's full of beautiful, ordinary stories of human kindness. And they are inspiring, and they are actually happening every day all around the world, uncelebrated. And when you read that and you see how people actually do behave to each other, it changes how you think of who we are. So there's dozens and dozens. I mean, there's so much happening there. It's just not what we usually focus on. We should.
Yeah. And that's interesting, because I was actually, my next question, which you just answered with an example, was, how you talk about the power of small acts in the book, small acts of kindness creating significant impact in the book. So that is a really wonderful example. And I gave my first, I was very excited. I gave my first keynote speech to a college 2 weeks ago. And I was trying to warn the students that, to be careful of that rabbit hole of the divisiveness on the social media platforms, and how people can paint false narratives of which you then compare yourself to. The life looks fabulous, but it's a facade. You never know if it's real or not. And as soon as I got done the talk, I went back to my hotel room, and there I was fighting with someone on the internet about politics. It's so hard to actually follow your own advice because you get sucked in so easily. So that's good advice, because we need to know how to navigate both worlds of the good parts of the internet and the stuff that we need to stay away from. So that's a good advice. Now, you also talk about the idea of people being skeptical in some parts of your book when it comes to our decision to act. One of the examples I love is when you talk about, I think it was in India, where there was a train coming and there was a girl whose foot was stuck on a track, and a gentleman just instinctively jumped in to kind of protect her and shield her. You make a distinction of, even if we don't actually do it, the fact that we may have emotively thought about it is also progress, and it's also a good sign. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was an incredible story. The guy literally put his body over the girl. The train thundered overhead. She was all right. He got up and went away without even getting her name. And, the video of this went viral in India. And this was just like a humble carpenter, I think. And he just said, look, it just came naturally. And I think that isn't so the reason that infectious generosity is possible is because of the incredible way that humans are wired. And there are really two things that I think are worth paying attention to. One is just this fundamental urge that we have to help someone else in need. Now, for most of us, there are countervailing urges, like, I don't want to die.
Yes, and that's a good example. Yeah, that one. Yeah.
Right. And so in many cases, people wouldn't throw themselves onto the track, but they would still feel this intense feeling of, oh my God, that poor girl. I wish I must do something, and the fact that feeling is there is when you think about it, a weird thing. I mean, we're supposed to be, if you, the whole story of evolution is that, we're wired for survival. Why would desires to risk your life for someone be part of our survival? Well, they have become part of who we are. And the answer is complicated, but it's fundamental to human success overall, is that we have these desires to cooperate with each other. So that's one important part of the riddle. The second part is that we respond to acts of generosity with generosity of our own. And this is where you mentioned the mystery experiment. This is one of the key things that kicked off this book, is that I had this inside view of a crazy experiment that was done when a couple of people in the TED community were interested to give away $2 million in an eccentric way. They wanted to give it away like $10,000 at a time to strangers on the internet, and they thought that it would be an important social experiment. So we wrote. So Elizabeth Dunn from the University of British Columbia came and was part of this. She's given a wonderful TED talk about generosity, and so we could see this whole experiment. I recruited people on Twitter saying, "Hey, do you want to come and be part of a stressful, weird social experiment?" No hint really as to what it was. And we had a bunch of people apply to the mystery experiment from 7 countries, and or rather, we picked in the end 200 people from 7 different countries. They each got $10,000. It was like this big scam email. Hey, congratulations! We'd like to wire $10,000 into your PayPal account. It was the hardest part of the experiment. They eventually took the money, and the only rules were that they had to spend it in 3 months, and that they had to tell us what they spent it on. So amazingly, against what traditional economic theory would say, which is that they would spend it on themselves because rational agents do that, 2/3 of the money was spent generously. So, it was, some on family, on friends, on strangers, on all manner of different causes and nonprofits and charities. 2/3 of the money. Even though for a lot of these people, 10,000 was potentially even a life-changing amount for many of them. And I was so moved by the responses, because what people basically, after the experiment was over, I wrote to people and said, "Come on, tell me more. Why did this happen?" And what people said was that, one, the act of being given the money made them feel seen, and they wanted to pass on that feeling of being seen to others. They felt that because this couple had been generous, they themselves should be generous. And it's like this visceral biological thing, and it's in everyone. And so that means that, once waves of generosity have started, they tend to keep going, because people go, "Oh, you've been kind." Yeah, that it triggers something in us. And it's not even being the recipient of generosity that can trigger it. Seeing someone else be generous can actually trigger it. So there's this feeling of sort of uplift that it gives you that's been scientifically studied. Yeah. So put those pieces together and then think, we're in the connected age. Well, wait a sec. One, there's so many different new ways to be generous, and those acts of generosity are likely to have ripple effects and be passed on in one way or another. 2, just seeing a video of someone being kind is amazing. So you look at someone who not everyone may like, but I think is an amazing person. So Mr. Beast on YouTube, he's one of the top YouTube influencers. He's got 200 million subscribers. Quite a lot of his videos are basically about acts of generosity. And when I talk to my nephews and nieces or whatever, or people in their teens, say, they love Mr. Beast, and it's teaching them that kindness and generosity can be cool, can be fun. Let's do it. People love it. So I think, there's this whole counter argument that the pendulum is starting to swing. If you look at what the next generation is passionate about, I think there's a lot of people just sick of the meanness of the connected world and eager to show a different way. And we can take huge hope from that.
Yes, I was going to, when you were speaking about that, I thought about the generational differences, and I thought about the millennials and Gen Z, which you do talk about in your book. And that's a really big demographic for us too, as far as the educational sector goes, because they are a very distinctly different generation. What Gen Z specifically is almost saying, you guys had your chance. We don't like some of those constructs that you set up. I don't want to work 15-hour work days. I don't want to die at my computer. I think that corporations should be more socially responsible. So I think that pendulum swing is greatly in part to the current generations rejecting a lot of things that they feel were not healthy necessarily for society. Would you say that's a good assessment of why that pendulum is swinging?
Yeah, I'm sure it's immensely and richly and deeply complicated, but I think that is definitely a huge part of it. And whatever criticisms my generation might make of Gen Z, the idealism and the desire to live a life that is not just about material well-being, but it's about making a better world and not being owned by money. I think that is beautiful and important and exciting.
Yeah. And I find it always strange too when you have like sort of like a baby boomer generation, if you will, or even Gen X have a problem with the Gen Z generation. Because if you look at the hippie movement, for example, of the 60s or the whole summer of love, and you look at the Gen Z generation, they really are kind of bookends as far as what they were asking for society, what they were asking of institutions and corporations. They just happen to, instead of have, picket signs and flowers in their hair, they just have the internet, but they're leading very similar organized revolutions against things that they don't like about society. So I think, if you look at their stance on gun control in the U.S. or healthcare or just the work environment, work hours. I mean, they really are leading the same kind of charge as past generations. So I think that's often overlooked. They're not that different, other than how they utilize the communication avenues. And that brings me to a question about education as well. So when it comes to education, I know you also have some initiatives there working with obviously TED Ed. So in what ways do you get involved with educational institutions or encourage those communities to also foster a more advanced culture of infectious generosity?
We don't have anything formal in that regard. I mean, our big initiative is TED Ed, which actually, funnily enough, only exists because of another case of kind of a generosity experiment. We back when we saw that giving away stuff seemed to work, one of the first things he did was start a fellows program and invited talented people to come to TED for free and to see what happened. And one of those early people, a guy called Logan Smalley, had this idea, hey, you should be doing an education program. He was an educator and he had this whole idea. So he basically, rewarded us for his fellowship by starting what has been one of the most impactful programs we have. Not that many people who don't have kids even know about TED Ed, but they do these short sort of 3 to 5 minute video animations that are just designed to spark curiosity, and they're used in so many schools. There's like nearly I think a couple thousand of them now, they are delightful. They just, we find great teachers and give them a chance to give their best lesson, and then use a voice actor and animators and so forth to make it into something that will grow. And some of the teachers have told us that, I've been working for 30 years and I've probably, coached 1,000 kids or whatever, or a bit more during that time. And in the first week of this my TED Ed lesson going out, you're giving me 100,000 kids, and wow. It's such an amazing era we're in, where great knowledge, great creativity can spread so beautifully. So that's our main thing. I mean, look, I think generosity is often taught at school today in different ways, and I think if there was one lesson that I could inject into every school syllabus everywhere in the world, it's this, and it's a surprisingly little known fact about the science of generosity and the science of happiness, which is that they're connected. One of the big drivers of happiness is generosity. People who give are happier. It's just absolutely clear from the evidence that they're happier. And in fact, it's also clear that the act of giving makes people happier. There's causality there. It's not just correlation. That's and yet in daily life we forget that. It's in the world, in the blizzard of sort of online commercial communication and shopping and all the rest of it. All of the emphasis is on, you've got to buy this, you've got to do this, you've got to be this. And we don't have time to listen to that softer voice in us that's whispering, that says, maybe there's another way to find meaning and deep satisfaction in your life. And so people, whatever else you do in your lives, dear children, listening to this, plan on find a way to be kind, like build kindness into it. And it doesn't mean you have to give away huge sums of money. It may not be anything to do with money. It may just be kind acts. You can be, generous by being hospitable to people, by looking at people who feel unseen and giving them your attention, by connecting people, by offering access to other people you know, or by bridging in the age that we're in, the generosity of going online and being courageous and saying, I'm going to stand in the middle here. I'm going to not be pushed into one side or the other. I'm going to listen respectfully to people I disagree with and try to find a different way of communicating. That's an incredibly important act of generosity. All these things, even though they can be hard and uncomfortable and so forth, when they're done repeatedly, they bring with them the deepest satisfaction and happiness.
Wow.
And I feel like it's taken me my whole life to learn this, but I feel like I'm finally really learning this and feeling this.
Thank you so much for all your inspiration today, Chris. It's been an absolute pleasure. Chris Anderson, who is the author of Infectious Generosity, the Ultimate Idea Worth Spreading. It's been an absolute honor. Thanks for being here today with us.
Thank you so much, Corey. Thanks.